Hi, I'm Chris, horror filmmaker and fanatic, here to explain how scary movies are. Today, I'm going over The Descent, released in the UK in 2005, but would follow up with its United States release in 2006. When 6 women go cave exploring, they find themselves suddenly trapped deep underground. Endless darkness, rampant claustrophobia, and growing paranoia lie in store for this troubled group of friends. But as they search for a way out, they soon discover signs that they may not be alone in this terrifying rocky labyrinth. Made on a budget of £3.5 million, which translated to US dollars in 2006 would be $6.44 million, the movie would go on to make $57 million. So, dollars for pounds, pounds for dollars, it made its money back. Rotten Tomatoes score of 86%, audience score of 76%. Today I'm going to break down what makes The Descent scary in 4 key categories that breaks down all the different ways that you can find fear in this film. And if you don't want the film spoiled for you, definitely skip to the time code right here, where I just give a non-spoiler overview of all the categories, and then my general recommendations based on my taste and general audience tastes. So without further ado, let's now dive into spoilers and find out how scary is The Descent. First category, thrills, the intense heart-pounding excitement in a horror film. The Descent is kind of in the middle with thrills. I think this film takes a good while to actually get to the intense part that you're waiting for, you know, them getting trapped underground, them finding the creatures, because I know like the trailer kind of spoiled that there were creatures, and I feel like the way the movie is paced and set up, the creatures don't appear until way later in the film, so I would have actually preferred for that to be a genuine surprise rather than what I'm waiting for the whole time. But that's the fault of the trailers, and everyone always complains about trailers nowadays always spoiling everything, which is why I don't watch trailers. But anyway, once they actually get stuck underground and you get all those classic claustrophobia scenes of them climbing around and being, you know, stuck in rocks and stuff, I think it's very thrilling. There's a lot of really genuine, heart-pounding, tense scene. It's not like running for our lives, oh, there's loud music. It's like more kind of no music, you're just stuck in the moment, and it's like hyperventilating, you can hear everything, and it's dark, and there's limited visibility. All of that really just kind of builds that tension, and I think is genuinely thrilling. And then, of course, once the creatures show up, there's all kinds of fight scenes and stuff with them. The way the film is shot, especially with the action scenes, it's a little hard to follow, but generally very frenetic and kind of shaky cam, quick editing, just like, oh my god, it's hectic, and that sort of fits what the characters are actually dealing with in those situations. They don't really know what they're doing, so they're just kind of hacking and slashing away, trying to survive. So I think that kind of fits, even though it's a little hard to follow. That being said, I do think the pacing of the film suffers, especially getting to them stuck underground. I think that takes a little while, and then even while they're stuck underground and they're, you know, running away from the creatures, and especially once all hell breaks loose and some of the characters die and they're all running around, there's a lot of dead space, a lot of time where it's just them kind of saying they're afraid and, oh, forget about them, where's Sarah, and just yelling, Juno, Sarah, Juno, and just kind of waiting for things to happen. Maybe this was mainly my second time watching it, but even then, like, I just kind of feel like, all right, come on, let's get to it. And this all stems from my major criticism of the film, which I will delve fully deep in at the end of the video, but for now, it's mainly just that the characters aren't that complex. They're pretty simplistic, and I can't really tell most of them apart anyway, because it's 6 women trapped underground, like most of them are white, and it's dark, and I can't see anything, so forgive me for having face blindness for half of these characters at least. But yeah, since I don't really care about the characters too much, I kind of just get bored when I'm waiting for them to end up fighting a new creature. When the creatures are actually there and they are fighting them, that is very exciting and also very gory and like tough, so it's like, ooh, these are intense action scenes, so that's why I leave The Descent kind of in the middle. Next category, grossness, the disgusting, ew, stuff that your mom would never want to look at. And The Descent, if you've ever seen the poster for The Descent, which that's all I saw in the mid-2000s, yeah, there's some gross stuff in this film. It's brutal. All the violence is very bloody, very gory and gruesome. Like, this film does not hold back, and it's pretty awesome. The first bit of grossness is definitely when Holly, she falls down and breaks her leg, and there's a bone just sticking right out of the knee. It got to me a bit. I was like, ooh, okay, because some films will do that, but it kind of looks fake. But in this film, it looks real, and that was pretty gnarly. You also got at the end when Sarah's gouging the eyes out of the creature and just shoving her thumbs deep in the holes of the creature, and it's like, oh, and that's pretty gross. Gross? I just said gross. It's gross and gruesome. Grossome, whatever. And then without a doubt, the grossest part of the movie, it's the poster when Sarah falls in the pool of blood and she's trapped in there, and then she ends up getting attacked by another creature and she has to kill that one, and it's like, oh, dang, and she's just soaked in blood and guts and stuff, and it's like, wow, that is nasty. Yeah, I think leaving this film a little bit on the higher moderate scale of grossness is pretty well balanced. Next up, shock value, the disturbing, surprising content that you don't usually see in movies. The Descent has a little bit of shock value as well, actually, kind of in the middle. First of all, the violence itself is very brutal and gruesome, so that, just adds a little bit of points to the shock value. But then also a handful of the women, mainly Sarah and Juno, just stepping up and becoming badasses and taking on these creatures. That's like a nice positive shock value, where you don't usually see that in horror movies. You usually just kind of see the main characters as perpetual victims, but in this case, a couple of the characters stepped it up. But then the main points where shock value comes into play is definitely Juno accidentally killing Beth. That is a really unfortunate twist that shakes a movie a bit, and it's surprising as well because it's right away. Like, Juno just killed her first creature, which already was a surprise of like, oh wow, they actually are fighting back already, nice. But then, one tap and you're like, oh snap, turn around, attack. Oh, she killed Beth. And it's through the throat, of course, the slow death, the gross kind. It's like, oh, that sucks. So that's a little bit of a twist. And then to pay off that epic betrayal, you also got Sarah pranking Juno, just shoving that thing right in her leg and messing her up and leaving her for dead. And then that's pretty cool. It's pretty dark. And we got a nice dark twist of the main characters just totally getting revenge and not caring about morality whatsoever. But then what I think really this film gets shock value, that opening. I really like the opening of this film because I didn't know that there was a whole backstory of Sarah is dealing with trauma. I don't even know if the trailer ever showed that, but when I was coming up with the synopsis for this video, every synopsis will point out that after a year of trauma from Sarah, then she goes cave exploring. I'm like, I prefer to not know that. I prefer to expect cave exploring, but then get surprised that 5 minutes into the film, there's a car crash and a husband gets a pole shoved through his face and a little girl dies. Like, the main character's family gone instantly. That hooked me in this film, and that was a great opening that I think is not talked about enough. So that's where most of the shock value points comes into play. Good on you, The Descent. Good on you. Final category, arguably the most important one, atmosphere. The tone of the film, the overall feeling, and how well it's building the fear inside of you. And to no one's surprise, The Descent has a strong atmosphere. Right away, I think this is one of the best concepts I've seen for a horror film. Just the entire idea of being trapped underground. Every human being on Earth would be afraid of that to a certain extent. So already, that's perfect. And the film utilizes its location very well. There's all kinds of great shots and great utilization of the limited lighting that we have with the characters having helmet lamps and lighting these red flares. So there's all kinds of scenes where it's like just red and it's like, oh my God, there could be anything around the corner and stuff. And then especially the claustrophobia scenes where they're trapped and the camera's in there with them. I appreciate that the film doesn't cut away from being underground. Once we get underground, probably like 15-20 minutes into the film, we're in there for the entire rest of the movie, and that's really cool. It's really cool to just have that limited like color palette of just black, red, sometimes green a little bit, like that's it. And the echo and the reverb, like all of the atmosphere of deep underground is captured very well in this film. I also really like the limited use of music. Anytime there's like little unsettling things, it's quiet and the characters are breathing and what was that? Huh? I like that a lot. What I don't like is when the film relies on false jump scares, especially before like the action really gets going and the creatures show up. Film relies too much on those false jump scares, and I get a little tired of them, especially when it's just like bats flying out. It's like, all right, come on, like we don't need that. We don't need a character startling someone or whatever. Like, let's just get to it, But like I mentioned with the thrills, I think this film mainly suffers from the fact that I don't care that much about the characters, and because of that as well, the story is very simplistic. They get trapped underground and they gotta escape. And there's 6 women, but there's only 2 that matter really at all. But the rest are just cannon fodder, and like fine, they're cannon fodder. So at least have fun different sequences where they die, and you keep it as a guessing game for me. Like, all right, which one's gonna be the first to die, and then this and that. But the film just kind of brushes past it, especially with the deaths of the middle 2 characters. Like they were around for a bit, but then they just kind of die like that, and it like doesn't matter. They didn't accomplish anything. There was nothing learned from the other characters. It's just, and then they suddenly die. The end. And it's like, all right, if you're gonna have 6 characters, have each of them die for different reasons. And even though the film is carried with that recurring dynamic between Sarah and Juno, and how we kind of know that something was up with Juno, and like Juno wants Sarah's forgiveness and Sarah's not really sure what's like, they have a very complicated relationship that definitely keeps me more invested, but I think that it wasn't explored enough. There wasn't enough depth, there wasn't enough push forward with that. The whole film, I'm waiting for Sarah to find out that Juno betrayed her. You got the cool locations, you got the scary monsters, you got the great setting and atmosphere, so pay it off with a great climax with those two characters. But the ultimate payoff is she finds out that Juno did it, hacks her leg, and then leaves. And then we don't see what happens to Juno, but we assume she dies, unless you hear about the sequels, but I never saw it and I don't care. And then Sarah escapes, or if you watch the UK version, she thinks she escapes but then doesn't escape. And it's like, I think you could have done more with that. I think there could have been a whole scenario where like they begin fighting each other and then more of the creatures show up and it's like, what do you do? And then maybe Sarah has to think for a moment and she sees Juno being attacked and like, should I help her? And then if you want that dark ending, she just turns around and walks away. Something like that, something a little bit more. But instead it was just boom, the end. And it's like, I waited the whole film. Come on, give me something more. This also adds into atmosphere, sort of, because atmosphere at this point, the category ends up kind of just being about the story. But I really like that the film takes these two main characters and turns them from victims to badass heroines who are taking on the creatures. And then Sarah kind of becomes more like a brutal, ruthless killer by betraying Juno. But I think that shift was a little sudden. I think it was too quick for her to go from the most scared one of the group because of trauma and all that to then immediately betraying Juno and having this like hardcore like 1,000-yard stare, like ugh. And it was like, okay, you killed like one creature, like yeah, you survived the pool of blood and all that, that was cool, but like I don't know, I just think that was a little sudden. I would have liked a little more of a gradual arc with that. Moving on to the non-spoiler overview of the categories, we got a healthy blend of all of these categories going on here, going from left to right. The film is kind of in the middle with thrills. It takes a little bit to get going in my opinion, but once it gets going, it does have a good amount of tension just constantly with the setting, especially if you're claustrophobic. Yeah, I mean, this film is going to be the claustrophobia movie for you, so there's all kinds of fun stuff with that. Then with Grossness, you know, if you've seen the poster, you probably know that this film's kind of bloody. There's some gross stuff in here, so it's a gruesome survival film, so be expecting for that. And then shock value, we got a handful of shock value beyond what you can expect with just survival and, you know, all right, there's going to be violence and something else going on, but the movie has a handful of twists along the way that you don't usually see, and I think that's really cool with the shock value there. And then finally, film's got a really good atmosphere because of the setting. I think it utilizes it very well, also doesn't over rely on music to scare you. There's lots of times where it is just quiet and you just hear the cave and hear, you know, the little noises and stuff, and that's the kind of atmosphere that I really am looking for. My overall recommendations, I have seen this film twice now, and it is a popular film, and I love the idea, and every time I want to like this movie, but I just end up feeling like it wasn't the best it could have been. I think certain things with character and story were kind of lacking, and the film was too focused on, ooh, it's a cool setting and scenario and playing that up. And it's like, great, you played it up, you did a great job with that, but I think that the characters, I just didn't quite care about them enough, and all of that kind of felt very surface level. And the film has some other stuff with its characters that have potential to be very engaging and different and interesting, but I think it does fall short of that as well. I am a harsh critic. I think most people will probably just enjoy this film, but I definitely don't dislike this film. I respect it a lot, and I think that people will generally have a good time with it. Maybe it does suffer on rewatches after you know what happens in the film, and that's where you kind of realize, like, there's not a whole lot to the story and characters for me to keep coming back to this. It's just a cool setting and scenario. That being said, also for horror newbies, I think this would be a fun challenge film for you. I think that this film is definitely gruesome and brutal enough that for horror newbies, it would probably affect you a good amount. You might kind of find yourself being like, oh my God, and it doesn't go too far. It doesn't become exploitative or anything like that. So I think this would be a fun challenge for horror newbies. I'd like to hear any horror newbies that are watching this channel, if you end up checking out this film, post in a comment, you know, how'd you feel? Did I send you a too strong recommendation, or were you like, no, I really like that? Because then if you really like this, then welcome. And that is how scary The Descent is. If you'd like to check out the movie, I got an Amazon affiliate link in the description, so if you use that link, you will be supporting the channel. Also, post a comment of any recommendations you have for other horror films you would like me to go over, and of course, please like and comment and subscribe and share these videos with all your friends who are curious about horror and want to hear new opinions. And thank you very much for watching.